Let me introduce to you Steve Svoboda. Steve has been a longtime friend. I've known Steve all the way back into college when I taught at North Central up in Minneapolis. And Steve is one of those leaders who right away you just knew that God had his hand upon this young man. Comes from an incredible family, mom and dad, great. I love them, and two brothers that I'm close to. Love this family. Wisconsin guy. Ooh, sorry
Yep,
about that yesterday,
I
man.
know.
But
That was a tough one
that
yesterday.
was tough. But anyway, you'll get to know Steve in this next 30 minutes, and you're gonna love him too. God has raised Steve up, and one of the things that I believe is a call on his life is, and sometimes we don't even see that, but I know that people that watch Steve from that 30,000 foot view or see him from the outside look at his life and say, man, that discipline, that wellness, the 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 commitment to wellness, to total wellness, the exercise, the physical, the spiritual, the mental, the social. uh, when you watch Steve and you see his life, and you'll hear it tonight, there's certain things that set people apart. And I've always admired Steve for his commitment and his dedication and his discipline in the area of wellness. And so Steve and I have talked about this for actually several months to make sure we pull this off. And I think you're going to be blessed by his experience and some of the principles that he shares out of his own life. And um, there are several others I know that will be joining us that want to watch this. I talked to them this week who are runners. Steve is a major part of our denomination is called the Assemblies of God, and we call it the AG Run Club. And my wife has the merch and is a major part of that too. And I know she's going to be watching tonight and loves Steve and in that commitment too. And you know, in about 1 minute, I'll let Steve take off, and I'll tee him up. But tonight is not about perfection. Tonight is not about you having to attain a level of fitness, whether that's physical, spiritual, social, mental, like somebody else that maybe has been down that road and worked at it for years. Tonight, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step.
Hmm.
And I know that Steve, I've been praying this, to be honest, all week. Uh,
Hmm.
some people can feel a lot of intimidation when we talk about this, and they can think, man, that's not my body type, or I don't like people, or, I'm not organized. That's not important to me. But we're going to share simple principles,
Hmm.
something as simple as small goals,
Hmm.
macro goals, and something as large as goals, like
Hmm.
focusing on what is most important as a micro goal, and then macro is the bigger picture, right?
Yep.
Or the elementary and the short term and the long term, or all these types of things we can work on. And
Hmm.
you're going to learn a lot. So don't get intimidated tonight as we talk about these things. All of us, listen, I learned something a long time ago, Steve, that communication companies have communication problems,
Yeah.
and they're the professionals, and they still have communication
Yeah.
problems. So these are people who, Steve and I are experienced at this, but we're here to help you make the first step
Hmm.
when it comes to discipline in all of these areas. So anyway, Steve, introduce everybody to you. Tell us about your family a little bit, and then I'm going to cue you up with the first question.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, it's an honor to be on this call with you and to be on your Instagram live. You're a leader to many. You've been a mentor in my life for a lot of years. And I'm excited to be able to talk to you tonight,
Same.
and for those that are listening, to be able to maybe encourage them as they're on their journey in life, in ministry.
Good.
And I'm no expert in any of these things, but I'm constantly trying to grow, and I'm constantly trying
Good.
to just make sure I'm at my best. And so, who I am, I grew up in Wisconsin, grew up in church, ended up at North Central University, where I met you and had such a great time there. Played two sports there, basketball and tennis,
Yep.
and plugged into a church that I was a part of for 4.5 years. That was something that was a priority to
Yeah.
me. find a church my freshman year and just keep on building throughout my entire
Yeah.
time at college. And so Oak Hills was that, and loved it. Met my youth pastor, Jeff, there, and still one of my closest friends to this
Yes.
day. And then did an internship in Missouri, stuck around there, got hired on, was there for 6 years, transitioned, was a part of a church in the Northeast for 6 years, was a part of a church in Texas, Dallas area for two
Mhm.
years, and now I'm back in Springfield, Missouri, and part of the called team at the national office, and just loving life, and it's been great. And
Yes.
so I've been married for just over 10 years
Yeah.
to my wife Bennett. We met in church, we met in small groups. So if you're single and you're looking to maybe meet that significant other in your
That's
life,
right.
small group is a great place to
Small
meet
groups.
them. And we have three awesome kids. My son Cal is 7, just started second grade. My daughter Parker just started kindergarten, and our
Mm.
youngest Hudson just started preschool. So all three of them are in school now,
Yes.
and we're enjoying this season of life.
I love it. Thank you, Steve. Steve comes with a lot of experience and has been around some great leaders in his life. And we're going to learn a lot from Steve tonight. Man, Brad and Hunter and Justin and Lydia, thank you for joining us again. DM somebody, let them know that we're talking to Steve Svoboda from Springfield, Missouri now. And you're going to learn a lot tonight on this topic of discipline and total wellness. And Steve, the first question I want you to talk about is give us some principles that you have learned in your life when it comes a large area of just discipline, right?
Mhm.
The spiritual
Mhm.
discipline, the physical discipline, the relational disciplines, and maybe we can get into those, those
Yeah,
individually and more specifically, but family discipline, all of those things.
yeah,
Um, what are some what are some practical things that you've learned along the way when it comes to discipline?
yeah. Uh, I think one of the most foundational things is that if we're not intentional about some of these things, there's a
Mm,
good chance that we won't see some of those things in our lives. And so if we just, oh, I hope that I'll have good relationships, or I hope that I'll be um, uh, growing in my faith, in my study of God's word, in
mm,
my physical rhythms of what it looks like to take care of my body and what I'm eating. If I don't have an intentional plan for some
great,
of these things, there's a good chance those things won't happen. And
great.
so I try to be pretty intentional on uh, I can't say everything that I do, but for the most part, I try to be pretty intentional with the way that I spend time with my kids, the way that I spend time in growing in my faith, not what I'm doing for others, but my relationship with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, I think that's where what we do as pastors, for those that are maybe in ministry watching this,
Yeah.
it stems out of that. And so I would say a lot of it just stems from I want to be an intentional person. And some of those rhythms have just developed over the course of a lot of years,
Yes.
not randomly one day when I've, woke up and just said, hey, this is what I'm, going to do. And I'm still far from the type of leader, individual, husband, dad, coworker in all of those areas. But I would say I do my very best to plug away intentionally at certain things.
Good. I love that word intention. My wife and I have talked about that many, many times. And one of the things that I admire about people of discipline is their intention. It's a
Mhm,
plan, right?
mhm,
If you don't plan to fail, then you've failed. If you fail to plan, then you've planned to fail, right? We've heard
mhm.
that before in leadership books. And I think the intention is so important. And it's a word that's filled with a lot of um, we can break that down,
Yeah,
a lot of details.
yeah.
So talk about the intention, whether that's creating calendars or reminders or one of the things that I did for years in my journaling is I would have somebody check my journal to make sure that I was journaling.
Mm,
Now I do it online, right?
yeah.
For me to right now, I have these goals.
Hmm.
And if I'm not reaching these goals, I share them with my family now. We
Hmm.
share our family goals at the beginning of the year. And at the
Yeah.
end of the year, we'll go over those goals. Okay,
Hmm.
did we meet those goals? Right. So talk
Hmm.
about the intention and how you do
Yeah.
practically some of those things.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of writing things
Good.
down. I think I'm constantly, my wife could attest to this. I have ideas for days. Oh, this would be fun, or this could be cool. The same would be true of certain goals that I have, but unless I put something down on paper or on my phone or tablet, whatever you use,
Yeah.
I think the moment that it gets out there, it becomes a little bit more of a focal point. And then with what I do with it from there is completely different. But I would say, first off, put it down on paper,
Great.
like write down some things and have somewhat of a focus. This is something that I want to attain. So maybe if someone's listening here, and they're saying, hey, I want to grow in my study of God's word, get a
Good.
little bit more specific with that. I want to read a book of the Bible, the book of John. Okay, so for the next 21 days, I'm going to read one chapter a day. Like get a little bit more specific with it from there. One of the things that I try to do, I wouldn't say I do this with every one of my goals, but this idea, an acronym of SMART,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll write it down, a specific thing. So okay, what is it? So it's specific, it's measurable. How can I measure this thing?
Great.
It's achievable. So some of the goals that I try to set, um, I can do without really thinking about it. Other ones, it's like that stretch goal, that big picture. I
Mm-hmm.
need God to be
Mm-hmm.
in this, but is it achievable? Is it relevant to just my day to day
Yeah.
life? Is this going to be
Yeah.
something that I'm able to commit to? And then the last one, having a timeline of like, okay, when would I like to
Good.
see this thing done by? And so maybe if there's somebody on here and they're saying, hey, I want to grow in the way that I just do life. I want to have stronger relationships. What does that look like? Get a little more specific with that. Or hey, I want to do this race. Well, which
Good.
race are you going to do? Have you signed up for
Right.
it? I want to grow in my journaling. For years, Jeff, I always wanted to grow in my journaling, but it was always so hard for me.
Mm.
A couple years ago, my pastor gave me this 5-year journal, and I have absolutely loved it. And I wish that I would have started a 5-year journal
Great.
day one at North Central, and to be able to look back, or
Great.
day one on, when I started out in ministry as a youth pastor in 2010, like some of those things that can help create some of those rhythms that
Yes.
now just are a part of who I am.
I love it.
But it doesn't always start that way. It starts with
No.
being able to say, first off, trying a few things out. What works for me might not work for somebody watching, or work for you. What works for you might not work for me. So it's not just a cookie cut formula, but
So
it's
true.
being able to say, how can I grow in this? And you said it earlier, it's not about perfection, but it's about progress. How can I keep progressing into a better version of me now than I
Great.
was a year from now, or a
Great.
year a year ago, so that a year from now I can look back and I can say, wow, look at these things that I've continued a rhythm in, and look at these new things that are now part of,
So
my
good.
my tool belt, if you will.
Yes. Man, Izzy and David and Becky and Molly, all you guys, man, thank you for joining us. I love seeing you here. Dolan, Ashley, Jordan. Listen, we are talking to Steve Svoboda, and we are talking about spiritual disciplines and total wellness. And we just talked about one of the first things that we should do in creating spiritual discipline in our life, any discipline really, is to create intention, to be intentional, a plan,
Yep.
right? To create a plan, writing that down, getting reminders in your phone,
Hmm.
sharing that accountability with an accountability partner, so somebody can say, "Hey, how did you do on your run today, or your ride to where you're riding tomorrow?" Right, and those kind of
Hmm.
things. Let me take that a step further,
Yep.
Steve, and talk about intention by just getting an app,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
Bible app. I do biking,
Hmm.
and I have the Under Armour app, and it,
Yep.
and it records all of my rides,
Hmm.
how long the rides were. I can bring up my favorite rides.
Yeah.
I can go by 20-mile rides or 50-mile rides or
Hmm.
10-mile rides if I don't have as much time.
Yep.
And it tracks that, and it keeps my heart rate and my all my calories and
Yeah.
all of that stuff. And I think that's just intention, right?
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. One of my favorite apps that helps me in some of these things is this app called Streaks.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of doing whether it's a mundane thing or something that's
Mm,
super awesome every single day, but building consistency. Because consistency over a long period of time that has a
that's
powerful
it.
snowball effect. But there's this app called Streaks, and it literally has the ability to customize something where you can put down a uh, I want to eat 5 servings of fruit
Good.
per day, or I want to read my Bible. You customize whatever you want. I want to ride
Great.
my bike, and then you click it, and there's something pretty cool about for me and how I'm wired, feeling like I'm achieving something. Like, oh,
Good.
I did something, and because sometimes in life we can just feel like, what am I actually doing right
Hmm.
now? I don't know if you've ever felt that, or I don't know if
Oh
someone
yeah.
watching maybe is like, man, am I actually doing anything? If you just were to look at your day and all that you do, you're like, if I were to sit and just think about everything, I'm probably doing more than I realize. And I'm probably doing
Hmm.
better than I think
So
in
good.
some of these areas. Sometimes we can be our own worst critic. And so I love something like Streaks because it helps me track certain things.
Good.
And in essence, it's a habit tracker. And
Good.
it's in a digital platform. I think it was like $4 and one of my favorite apps by
That's
far.
great.
Yeah.
Man, thank you. Thank you for that. Nick and John Bongiorno, good to have you here. Alan Passion, I know we both love him. So we're talking to Steve Swoboda, and we are dealing with the discipline, the intention of our disciplines as leaders. We talked about that spiritual discipline a little bit,
Mhm.
and that bleeds into our total wellness.
Mhm.
I want to talk about total wellness a little bit. Mental health has taken over, right? And
Mhm.
relational health, our relationships and relationships with people. And one of the things that I've really appreciated about you, and I think this is it's small, but it's what I want to talk about here, and that is valuing people when you meet them.
Mm.
Relational capital, I like to call it. As a
Yeah.
leader, you know, as a leader, trying to remember names
Mm.
or looking people in the eye when you first meet them or shaking hands and
Yeah.
making people feel valued, and you're not moving on to the next person, the next conversation, right?
Hmm.
I want you to talk about relationships and especially those of us in ministry.
Yeah.
Ministry is built on relationships. What are
Yeah.
some of the things that you have done, Steve? I can't, and I really mean this. I can't think of a negative word that I've ever heard about you from the
Mm.
people in our circles,
Wow.
and I guess you would expect that from the people in our circles, right? But every time your name comes up, it's like,
Mm.
oh yeah, oh yeah. It's like Ryan Leake,
Mm.
right? We
Yeah.
we love Ryan Leake
Yep.
too, man. And it's like there are some of these people that you have trusted them because they make you feel when even if it's a few minutes, you've left them and you feel better.
Hmm.
So talk
Yeah.
about relational capital and wellness with relationships,
Yeah.
talk how important that is.
Yeah. Well, I think Proverbs talks about it. Our words can bring life or can bring death. And I think
Mm,
for me, I want to use my words to lift people up. And so any chance that I get, I don't just wait for it to kind of like, oh, I got this word from the Lord to give to you. I'm going to encourage you. No, it's like I want to do my very best to be an encouragement to anybody that I would
man.
get the chance to have a conversation with. And so one of
Yes.
my goals, Jeff, and you said it right there, is like I pray that people after having a conversation with me just feel better
Good.
about their journey through whatever they're walking through, whether they're a dad, whether they're a student, whether they're today I'm sitting in our middle school. I serve in our middle school service at church, and so I'm serving and
Okay, stop real
uh,
quick. I want people to hear what you just said. Okay, Taylor, Bryce, Nick, Bryn, Dylan. Man, we both love Dylan McNeely. Listen to it. Did you hear what he just said? Steve serves at a national level. Okay, in our denomination, and yet he's involved in a youth group in a youth ministry at the local church. Okay. I don't know if you heard that, but keep going, Steve.
Yeah. Yeah, so I genuinely love it. Youth ministry's changed a lot over the years since I was a full-time youth pastor, but I'm sitting there and today I love it how our team has set in place some high school students to lead table discussion among some of these middle school students. And so
Mm,
there's a student who pretty sure this was his first day leading a table discussion. He's a 10th grader. And right at the end of it, I turn to him and I give him a fist bump and I just say, bro, you crushed it today. Like you absolutely did a
yeah.
amazing job leading these junior hires when it comes to the discussion time. Proud of you. And it was a 15-second thing,
Yes.
but I pray that it's something that at least sticks with them for a couple minutes, if not this season through high school, to think, wow, somebody spoke some life into me. And
Mm,
that's a situation. I pray that that would be the case for guys. Last night I'm at our men's night and having conversations with the guys, and I'm talking to one guy who pretty new to his faith, and I made it a point to introduce myself to him. A buddy of mine was like, hey, yeah, this guy, I invited him. He's been coming to church for a few weeks, just got baptized. And so I'm like, man, that's amazing. I'm going to make sure I find him tonight and have a conversation with him. I started talking with him for about 5 minutes before he leaves. And this morning I made a point to find him at church just to say, hey, and to just encourage him. And so for me, I think it's just, I know what encouragement does for my soul and
man.
for who I am. I get it. Everyone's love language, everybody's different. But for me, um, and I also know what is good for me is not always the same thing that other people
Right.
need. But who
Right.
doesn't want to be encouraged?
Yes.
I've never
Yes.
met someone that's like, please stop
Right.
speaking life over me. I just
Right.
haven't met anybody like
No,
that.
no.
And um, so I just think if there's an opportunity to speak something kind, encouraging, positive to somebody, why not? Why
I
not
love
when I
it.
walk in the room, try to be the most encouraging person in the room?
That's it.
And so, and I don't always do that, but it's something that I try to make a point.
I love it. Hey, if you're joining us, this is Steve Svoboda. He is one of, I can say, one of the great young leaders in our movement. And we're talking about total wellness. We've covered the spiritual life and the spiritual discipline of the youth leader, next gen leader, right? All leadership, right? Some of these principles transfer. Practices may not, but the principles do, right? And we're going to take some questions. Darrison, thanks for joining us. I love you, young man. Bryn, you too. Send us a question. We've got about 5 minutes left. And I have one more question for Steve. Christian, thanks for joining us. Put a question in there. I'll find it and get that to Steve before we're done. But I want to go with one more thought tonight. I'm going to ask Steve this question. When it comes to discipline and intention and setting schedules and having a plan, right?
Mhm.
Short term, long term. What would be maybe two short term goals that you have right now? I want our leaders, our listeners to kind of hear what this looks like in the life of a leader.
Mhm.
Two short term, two long term goals, like micro, macro,
Mhm.
right? Elementary and collegiate, something you're working on right now, and then something that you want to do in the future. And
Yeah.
I think young leaders need to be able to say, wow, you mean Steve is dealing with something that small right now? I am too.
Hmm.
Or, wow, my dream is not big enough for that macro goal that he just shared. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say in the short term, my kids are young and
Hmm.
my schedule looks different. Uh, some months I travel a lot, some months I don't. I would say a short term goal right now is I am trying very, very hard to make it a point to have one on one super quality time. I have
Hmm.
one on one time with my kids pretty much each day, but I'm talking a little bit more unique.
That's
Take my
good.
daughter out for ice cream, take my son out to grab a burger, like do something with each of my kids once a week. And
Yeah.
then in the same way, do that with my wife once a week. there's some weeks that I do far better than others, but
Sure.
that
Oh,
is a short-term
yeah.
goal because I
Yeah.
realize, and I would say that that's probably a long-term goal. I just want that to be a rhythm forever. But as they're in school now, and as schedule looks different,
Great.
it's like, okay, I can't do what I did over the summer now. And when it comes to goals and just rhythms, I think we got to be okay with. In new seasons, changing things up a little bit. Does not mean we need to
Okay.
flip the script completely,
Okay.
but
Okay.
I can't do what I did in the summer now that it's school year. It's
Sure.
different. My kids aren't around the same that they were during the
That's
summer. So
good.
it needs to shift a little bit. So I would say that that would be a short term one. And yes, it stretches long term, but
Hmm.
trying very, very hard at that. We're a close family, so our kids are always wanting to
Yeah.
be with us, and like, but how can I do one-on-one
Yeah.
time with
Yeah.
each of them? Grab a donut with
Well,
my son, or
if
go grab,
anybody,
you know,
if anybody's watched Steve, you'll see Cal. What is Cal? 7,
seven.
8,
Yep.
7. You guys run together.
Hmm.
I mean, you have introduced
Hmm.
him to that wellness, and I mean, he's probably run more than most 7-year-olds in the world because he's got
Yeah.
a dad that loves to run. But we've watched that, and the impact. Cal will never forget that, whether he runs or not. Cal may
Right.
not be a marathon. He
Yep.
may not run a marathon,
Yeah.
but he'll never forget the times he ran with you, right?
I know I definitely won't.
Oh
I
yeah.
pray that he won't forget those things either. But
Give us
I think
the
a
long term.
long-term goal.
Yeah, talk about
Yeah,
long term, sir.
long-term. You know, I love reading Mark Batterson's books. I think
Mm,
he's one of my favorite authors.
mm,
And I remember years ago he kind of put together this list of, like, in a way, kind of bucket list type
yeah,
things, but he didn't call it bucket list, and it's in essence life goals. And he
yeah,
had this huge
yeah.
list, and some of them he had done, some of them he hadn't done yet. But I would say one thing. I know some people that are watching, maybe they're in ministry, maybe they're not. I know, speaking specifically those from, uh, with a faith background, something that is important to me is the Word of God. It's something early on in ministry when I was at North Central. I didn't have the best rhythm of, like, spending time reading and praying and that kind of stuff. It
Mm,
really developed as I was, heading out of college into my first, ministry role, that I really got that
good,
locked in.
good,
And sports have been a huge part of my life, but in a way, it was like I was on the team, but I wasn't reading the playbook. So it was like,
man.
hey, we got this huge playbook of plays that we should know and we should understand. And it was like, I got this. And that's kind of how it was when it came to, reading the Bible. And
Yeah,
it, all
yeah.
of a sudden I had this moment where I was like, I cannot do this any longer. I need to be in the Word of God, and I need to pray because I can't do this on my own.
Mm,
And you were a big part of that. A few other people were a big part of that in just helping me realize the need for some of those spiritual
good.
disciplines. But I would say, um, there's not really been a season over the last, really since 2012, that I've not had weekly, if not daily at this point now, uh, guys that I'll read the Bible with.
That's great,
And it started March 2012, where I would gather together with students and read the Bible. And now that life looks a little bit different, there's a couple of groups that I do virtually, some that are pastors only groups, some that are like some of my buddies, and then just other people. But we'll, be a part of a Bible reading plan, and
man.
that's really a long term goal. I will never not do that. And I would
Yeah.
say, along with that, you had a huge influence on me, Jeff.
Mm,
My dad as well, when it came to the Bible and giving the Bible away to somebody. And
yes.
um, I remember you would do this thing where you would take a Bible and you would go through it for a while. I think you would take like 2 to 3 years with notes and
Yeah.
messages and highlights
Every
and
2 years.
stuff. Yep. And then you would give it away to somebody. And I'll never forget, we were on a trip with a bunch of others to Israel. And on the way back, you gave me one of those Bibles.
I did.
And I just remember how impacting that was for me. And I,
Yes.
love giving the Bible away to people. And I've had
Yeah.
this goal, and it's really a life goal
Yeah.
because it can't be done in a year, it can't be done in 2 years or 5 years. But I want to give away 100 Bibles that I've gone through
Yes.
front to back with notes and specifically, have in mind who I'm going to give it to when I start that Bible. And
Good.
so you're a part of that legacy. My
God,
dad, who gave me one of those Bibles, is a
it
part of that.
started,
And so,
man.
but that's a long term goal.
I love
I
it.
can't do that in 5 years. That will take me a long time to do,
Absolutely.
but it keeps me in the Word of God, and it continues to uh, be an encouragement to somebody that I give that Bible to. Um, and there's certain criteria of who would get that a Bible
Yeah.
in that type of way.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but that's a long term goal, and
I
that's one
love
of
it.
the long term goals that I would say that I
You
have.
know,
But yeah,
I hope you guys are all hearing this. Again, we're at the end of our discussion. Thanks for joining us. Man, so many, Quentin and Marcos and Martin, man, so many different people joining us here. Thank you for doing that. What we were talking about spiritual disciplines. We're talking about the intention of the spiritual leader, the total wellness and, exercise and relationships. And we talked lastly here with Steve about short-term and long-term goals. And I'm so glad you brought up that long-term goal of being in the Word, and because honestly, who we are is so much more important than what we
yeah,
do. And I tell you, I've learned as leaders, and I want everyone to hear this, whether you're with us live right now or you're listening to this, you know where to find us. Just hit the link tree in all the socials, and you can listen to this on the iTunes podcast. You can watch it on our YouTube channel, or you can read the manuscript. We're all there.
hmm
Hit the link tree. But one thing I've learned as leaders, and
hmm
Steve is reminding me of this, and I was almost jumping in to interrupt you when I heard you say this, but what we do in moderation as leaders,
hmm
okay, what we do in moderation is done at an elite level of excellence
hmm
or extravagance by the people that follow us, because they
hmm
see the smaller things maybe that we do that we don't think are very impactful, and they take that to the next level.
yeah,
And so our moderation becomes their elite. Our
yep,
moderation becomes their extravagance. It's like the ceiling and the floor,
hmm
right?
yeah,
My
yeah,
ceiling and the things, have become the floor of the people who follow
mm
us. And so I'm so glad you brought that up, because this passing out the Bible did not start with me.
mm
It started with my mentor
mm.
who gave me his Bible.
Wow,
I will never forget that moment. And
yeah,
he's saying, and we went over that Bible, Steve, and I'm looking at all of the notes that he had taken for years.
yep,
So I decided to do that. I think I gave away 13 or
hmm
14, and every 2 years,
I love it.
because I didn't want one year. I wanted some content,
Yep,
get in there. And full circle, you gave me a gift back in March. You
hmm
gave me a
hmm
Bible,
hmm
and I still have it. It's in our room. I know right where it's at. It's sitting
yeah,
there on the stand,
hmm
and that was very meaningful to me too, because of this principle
yeah,
of relational capital.
yep,
That's a discipline.
yeah, yeah,
Whether shaking someone's hand, remembering their name, looking them in the eye, or gifting them something of spiritual significance,
yeah,
that's relational capital, and that's total wellness.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
burning bridges, right? Man,
yeah,
Steve, thank you. Man, we got to go. I try to keep this at a half an hour, but
hmm
man, I loved talking to you. Thank you for your wisdom.
yeah,
Thank you for your life.
mm
Thank you for who you are. And I pray that you'll follow him, that you'll find Steve Svoboda. You'll see his information right there, and follow him. And you're going to learn a ton beyond this recording of Sunday Night Live.
hmm
Steve, I love you.
Hey, love you too, General. You are a general in the faith, and to me and to so many others, and I'm grateful for the impact and the influence that you've had on my life, and it's an honor to be on here with you tonight.